The Minding Your Business podcast, episode 67, we've reached now, is brought to you by not only Brooks Brothers Consulting, as it normally is, but also by the Binge podcast network. Thank you so much for those that have been supportive of the new podcast network. I mentioned it on episode 66 last week, and it's great that we're now at episode 67 here on Friday, October the 26th, 2018. The Binge podcast network is a collaboration with my great brother Dominic Lawson of the Startup Life podcast, as well as Owls LLC, and we're working again collaboratively to connect great podcasters with great content and great shows. Whether you're new to podcasting or whether you've had an existing podcast for some time, we'd love to connect with you, have you be a part of the network, and the network be a resource for you as you grow your show and your audience. And we've got a great lineup coming already. Don't Touch Nothing podcast. I know I'm going to talk some more about that as you hear me go along, but I mentioned the Startup Life, this particular podcast, and several others that we're going to be joining the lineup and get out to you, because there's great content with great people, men and women all around this country who deserve an opportunity. And the podcast network is going to feature a myriad of topics ranging from sports, entertainment, business, as you hear from us, politics, comedy, satire, family shows, law shows, just about anything, pets, children. We want to have, again, this myriad of diversity here with the Binge Podcast Network. So look for the website to come. It's going to be onabinge.com. Because that's what we want to do. We want to send you on a binge with this great content. But that I'm in the process of building that website. So look for that probably here in the next week or so. And just more coming from myself and from Dominic. And then Brooks Brothers Consulting is a consulting leadership and banking consulting group. Myself and Philip, my brother, started it back June 2013. And you should get with us. We work with small business owners as well as banks and credit unions. We help develop your sales platform from your retail and business banking areas from the bank standpoint, and just overall sales development strategy for your business. And so we're working with several clients around now. That's actually picked up. So that's taken a good bit of my time, but it's been phenomenal, and it's actually led to some of my travels. So get with us, 901-808-3801. That's 901-808-3801. Or you can visit www.brooksbrothersconsulting.com. That's www.brooksbrothersconsulting.com. We are at episode number 67. We'll be discussing community reinvestment, among some other things. I'm going to lay out the lineup. But first, you know what we do.
What we do here is go back. Thank you, and thank you. I'm your host, Champ Ron. This is the Minding Your Business podcast, coming to you on Friday, October the 26th, 2018, powered by the Binge Podcast Network. You will hear more about the Binge, not just from me, but from other podcast hosts and great leaders around the country as we add content providers and content creators. So happy you could be here with me. Shout out to everybody on Facebook Live, Daniel Hodges, Lisa, and everybody that's joined in. And so the rundown for today's podcast, I'm going to give a tribute to a special brother of mine who has transitioned this week. I'm going to talk about community reinvestment from the banking standpoint. Is your bank the one that you're running to, standing in line with, and getting fees and all that? Are they really participating in helping to grow the community? And are they being holistic in that investment in terms of working with the community? Are they only working in some of the best communities, and are they shutting down branches in maybe low and moderate income communities? Are they just tossing money at it and not really investing? So we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to present to you next would be what I learned while I was in St. Simon Island, Georgia on this week. I had a great time there, and I was able to learn a whole lot at the Bank Compliance Conference down there with Community Bankers Association of Georgia, who are great people, great men and women down there. They're doing some great work, but I learned some great things down there while I was there. So I'm going to share with you what I learned. And then finally, I'm going to wrap up the podcast with my own discussion and thoughts around Black flight. And this is around African Americans who, over the decades, chose to leave their original neighborhood, their original community, and they moved out to the suburbs or moved out to non-Black areas in terms of the majority population. And there was a pretty good discussion on that on my Facebook feed on this week. And so I want to discuss and kind of give my thoughts on what Black flight is and how to compel Black people to move back into their core neighborhoods such that they can be resources. It's not to be divisive. It's not just black and white, but people should support their community, and then they should collaborate all around. And that makes for strength. When you divide and assimilate, you lose touch with culture, you lose touch with your origins, you lose touch with who you are. And when you do that, it sets you up certainly for failure, in my opinion and the opinions of a lot of people. So, again, I'm your host, Champ Ron, episode 67. I thank you. You can connect with me at Champ Ron, whether it is on Twitter, whether it is on Facebook, and whether it's on even Instagram. You can connect with me at Champ Ron. I'd love to be able to hear from you. You can DM me. You can reach the podcast at www.themybpodcast.com. I'm sorry. www.themybpodcast.com. You can check us out. My email is ron@themybpodcast.com. Be sure to share, to like this particular podcast. So subscribe to it, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, Google, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, all these different places, man, where you can get great podcast content. Be sure to check out the Minding Your Business podcast. Leave a positive review, and be sure to check us out and check out past episodes and whatnot, because we would love to have you do so. So it just helps with growing the show and helping us reach the audience that we would love to be able to reach. On this week, I told you that I traveled via Atlanta, connected in Atlanta, and flew then to Jacksonville, Florida, and then drove around an hour just north of Jacksonville, Florida, to St. Simon, Georgia. What y'all laughing at? You folks over there laughing. So I drove to St. Simon's Island, Georgia. It was great weather. It was a great time, and I'm going to talk about that a little later in the podcast. But as I was returning from Jacksonville, so I had a connect flight from Jacksonville to Atlanta, and then from Atlanta back here to Memphis, Tennessee. And actually, when the wheels were turning up, so we were lifting off from Atlanta, Georgia, and I still had cell phone signal. And a good buddy of mine, close friend, sends me a message that was a message I would never want to receive about anybody. It was a message that was informing me of the life transition of a really good brother and a really good friend a really good colleague, not just to myself, but to many people, Mr. Jason Daniels. Jason was the founder and the president of Titans Electrical here in Memphis. Jason was the founder of Evolve 901, which was launching off. He was heavily involved with Coach Michael Burt, the Nashville area, with Monster Producer, and had brought that platform to the Memphis area as recently as just last week, where I had the opportunity to attend the networking event that he set up. It was very well attended. As always, he was had the energy level high. He was very excited about that platform and the things that he was working on. And so I get a message, and what was interesting was I got the message, and then the cell phone signal went out. So you can imagine I'm going up in the plane, I'm leaving Atlanta, I'm heading to Memphis. I get this message that my guy's transitioned, so I'm like, dang, is this real? What's going on? I know people don't play like that when it comes to things, of that nature. And so, I'm kind of panicking a little bit on the plane. I can't even really enjoy the flight because, I'm hearing about my guy. And by the way, Jason had just turned 40 years old, a guy that worked out just about every morning, so seemed to be in really good shape. So I'm like, man, what happened? So I land in Memphis, right? I get back. I'm waiting for the cell phone signal to pick back up so I can check in and see, man, what's going on. And some of my other people was hitting me up like, Jason has transitioned life, man. And I almost didn't even want to get off the plane, man, because I didn't want it to be true. I just didn't want it to be true. And so I sat there, man. People were getting they carry on luggage and stuff. And, I'm sitting right outside of first class. And so people are stepping around me. They're getting their stuff and whatnot. And I'm just sitting there. I'm looking at my phone. I don't even really know what to do because, I don't know who to, trying to reach back and try to see what's going on. And so I get off the plane. I talk to my guy, Scott Kenny. Good brother, and we're able to confirm some things. And unfortunately, it was true that Jason Daniels had transitioned and had died on Tuesday, October the 23rd, which was the same day I was returning back from business travel. Let me start off this way. I send great thoughts and condolences to the Daniels family and all the families connected to the Daniels, to his great love, Becky, who I had the chance to meet on a couple different occasions and be able to witness and their demonstration of love between Becky and Jason. Always in personal conversations with Jason, just the amount of love and admiration he had for Becky and for his daughter Riley, who I did not get a chance to meet, although I feel like I've gotten a chance to meet her just from hearing Jason discuss his family and how he did things for his family, and he always looked to invest in his family, and he wanted to be his very best for his family. And so for those that didn't get a chance to know Jason, or maybe you've met him in passing, or maybe you've just seen him on Facebook and things like that on social media, Jason was a extremely passionate young man. And not passionate from the sense of just, recklessly doing things, but he really had a deep-hearted passion for people and seeing people win. And then I think that's something that developed in him over time. I met him about 7-8 years ago, and we just always connected because we had that same kind of positive energy. And I noticed that with him. There was nothing derogatory, nothing. He certainly wasn't a glass half empty type guy. But I was able to witness Jason connect people from different walks of life. And this is very similar to my overall purpose. Jason could operate in diverse climates, diverse audiences, which was unique. he always had a good word for you. I can remember earlier this year, I was going through kind of a difficult time coming out of 2017, 2018. I had some things impact me personally that impacted my family from a revenue generation standpoint. And I reached out to Jason. As a matter of fact, I was at the gym. I reached out to Jason. I remember this conversation. And Jason, listened to me, and, he always referred to himself as the Titan, which was very fitting for him and how he lived his life. And they always say, man, Ron, you got to tighten up, baby. You got to tighten up. And I always, of course, I refer to myself as the Champ. That's a name that's dear to me, that was given by my dad very early in my life. But so we always would go back and forth and fun jest about champs and titans and the comparison and contrast of them, man. We would have fun with that, man. Shout out Gerald Jones with the Buy Black podcast. Thank you for joining, Gerald. I appreciate it. Make sure that y'all go buyblackpodcast.com. Gerald's also launched recording his podcast on Facebook Live, so make sure you connect with Gerald W. Jones II. He's on my Facebook friends list, so if you check me out, you can connect with him, and he has phenomenal content. So Jason and I were able to connect on a number of different projects, a number of different initiatives. He was a great friend and supporter of this podcast. Matter of fact, if you want to learn more about Jason and you want to just hear his voice, or you just want to learn more about who he is and our interaction, go back and check episode number 33 of the Minding Your Business podcast. That's number 33. It was back in February of this year, of 2018. And you can listen to my interview with one Jason Daniels of Titans Electrical, home of the hustle. Big Tennessee Titans fan, which we did let him slide with that. We let Jason slide with the Titans, Tennessee Titans, but he was a great avid supporter of the Tennessee Titans football team, and so we support him for that. And he supported my transition from the Dallas Cowboys to the Green Bay Packers, and that was for personal and professional reasons. But he was very supportive of that too, man. But what I'll miss most about Jason, and again, everybody handles transition different. So I'm not one to tell people how they should handle things and whatnot. His funeral is scheduled for tomorrow. I will be present. But what I remember most about Jason was just his sincere positivity for working with, again, a diverse group of people. Everybody that Jason connected with was not people that were from his walk of life or looked like him when they look in the mirror, or maybe were not of the same path in terms of Jason was on, maybe not at that same level. But Jason would make time for just about anybody. If you had the positive mindset and you wanted to grow and you were serious about doing that, you could get time with Jason. And some people aren't like that. Some people get to where as they start to level up, they start to think of themselves in a celebrity mode, and then when they fall, they want everybody's help, and they want to show up when they've taken a lot of L's and want everybody's help. Jason wasn't like that. Jason always could find time for you. He'd make time for you. And he was always there in support. Not that he could attend everything, although he tended a great bit, but even when you would host something and he couldn't attend, he would share it. He would tell people, to give people a positive word. Hey man, go check this out with so-and-so. Go check this out with them or him or her. And I would host things, and even when he couldn't be there, people would show up and be like, yeah, Jason shared this with me and said that I should come and I should connect with you. And you know what I mean? That's something that you really love from a brother or a sister, is that positive connectivity. And some people won't even do that. A lot of people are, sometimes our society is very pessimistic, and, people like to be selfish and kind of hold things. And, I don't want to support them, because they didn't come to mind, or, we got all this pettiness sometimes that keeps people at certain levels. But Jason didn't operate that way. And so I'm grateful to have known Jason Daniels. Anytime I called on him, he was there. I was managing a retail team in the banking credit union space, even just last year. And when I called upon him to come speak, along with Philip Ashley Ricks, the chocolatier here in Memphis, both of them came, and Jason came and did. He was so phenomenal, him and Philip. That team was constantly asking, when could we have him come back, and how could we connect with him? How can we get more content from him? Because he really did just a great job. And this was just around a year ago that I had him do that. He spoke to a team of about 40 that reported to me at that time. And so I really am, again, grateful for having known Jason. I'm better for having known him. I hope that those that do know him and knew him best will celebrate his life and his legacy. And he would want us to not sit and be down and that sort of thing. Although, that's certainly easy to do and respected. And, definitely from the family standpoint. But for those of us that were friends and colleagues and things like that, one of the things that we all should have learned from Jason in his life was how to be able to carry forth and continue to work and continue to press up the mountain to get to the top. And most importantly, to bring others with us as we push towards the top. And so I love you, my brother, Jason. I'm going to miss you. I'll always remember some of our great conversations that we had. I always remember the energy that you brought and the aura when you walked into the room, how you always had a good word for people. And so I'm going to miss you, my brother. And I definitely pay tribute to you and honor those brothers and sisters. Anytime that we have them and they transition, we want to keep a piece of them and be able to move forward. And so I want to take a quick moment for those listening to the podcast and those on Facebook Live to give a good, warm tribute to the Titan, Mr. Jason Daniels. Thank you all so much for allowing me to give this tribute to Jason. Thank you to everybody, Daniel Hodges, Scott Kenny, Lawrence Thompson, Dominic Lawson, just a myriad of you that have reached out to me. And again, Jason had a great network of people, and I thank and love you all for your support and look forward to continuing in his memory and in his legacy, being a resource for his business, being a resource for the things that he was doing, again, to uplift and connect this community. And again, I love you, brother. Jason Daniels, Titans Electrical, and the Titan rises, man. The Titan definitely rises. And that's how he lived his life. So thank you all so much for that, man. So, moving on from that, that's a mean transition to move on from. But today's topic actually fits something that was near and dear to Jason's heart, that he spent a lot of time working, and how he incorporate his business into the community. And so I want to talk about community reinvestment, and particularly as it involves banks. So I told you that I spent some time in St. Simons, Georgia. And, don't weep for me. I had a great time there. The weather was beautiful. It was there by the beach on the Atlantic coast. And I was attending the Compliance School conference there that was sponsored by the Community Bankers Association of Georgia. And I had a really good time for about 2.5 days. Got a chance to meet several people in banks that are scattered kind of around Georgia. And the purpose of it was there was a lot of discussion on some compliance things that are specific to the banking industry. But one of the reasons that I was there was to discuss the accountability that banks have around CRA, which is the Community Reinvestment Act. That act was instituted by the United States Congress back in the 1970s that followed the redlining laws. Redlining, as to define it, this was a banking term. Banks did this. What they did literally was they would take a map. This was going back, coming out of the 1930s all the way through the 1970s. Banks were notorious for taking a map and drawing a red line around low and moderate income areas that mostly housed other ethnic groups, Latinos, blacks, and whatnot. And their bank leadership would make cognizant decisions to decide not to offer the same level of products and services to that area that they would offer other areas. And so that led to, and there was a lady in Illinois that brought up that particular issue and she referred to it as redlining. And so, again, the Congress released the law of CRA, which requires and holds banks accountable to not redlining in areas, and they have an exam that comes periodically from their regulator, whether it's the OCC, which is the Office of Currency, or the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or the FRB, the Federal Reserve Bank. So whoever their regulator is will come in periodically and do an examination of the bank's investment in low and moderate income areas, which comes down to a loan test, an investment test, and a service test. And they vary depending on the size of the bank. But they come in periodically, oftentimes unannounced, and they have to show from their portfolio, the banks to the examiners, what have they done? Where have they done loans? Who have they done them for? What areas? What size? What type? What were the interest rate? What were the fees? To make sure that the bank doesn't do things like this person in this area with the same credit criteria, the same everything, but because they were female or because they were black or because they were Chinese or because they were seniors, they were older, or because they were younger or because they were anything, right, that their fees are higher or their rate is higher comparable to someone outside of that particular community. And so for the last 45 years, this CRA examination has been around. And I have ownership now in a group called CRA Partners, where I'm also operating as a relationship officer. And I'm going around within a territory, and we're working on my territory now, but I'm going around to compel banks to make this investment really through the Senior Crime Stoppers program. And Senior Crime Stoppers operates in various nursing homes, state veteran homes, as well as HUD housing. And it provides safe and secure living environments for seniors. And you guys have heard of the Crime Stoppers phone number. That's the 24-hour number. We provide a toolkit. We provide training for the staff and whatnot. So all those things come into play with this particular program, and we offer the banks a way for them to do so, whether it's through a loan, through a grant, through an investment. But it allows them a diverse way, because what some of the banks have figured out is it's easy from an investment standpoint to just go buy what's called mortgage-backed securities, which allows a financial advisor to go into the market and purchase a bundle of mortgages from low and moderate income areas, bundle that in, let the bank buy it, and they get credit on their CRA exam for that. And that can be a good thing, but yeah, I want to be able to take it a step further. And there's some of us that want to take and hold the bank accountable to the next step, which is how do you actually go into the community and what are you actually offering, right? That's helping build that community. So it's one thing to go and buy securities and things like that. It's another thing to have your people, particularly if you don't have a branch there and things like that. How are you going in the community and helping to edify it? And how are you investing in specific projects, not the sexy ones, not the ones with the pilots on them and all that, but the projects that help rehab and develop neighborhoods? And from my banking background of nearly 17 years, I'm finally at a point, y'all, where I'm working in something that's really a good passion of mine based on, where I'm from and how I grew up. So I'm going to be doing a good bit of travel going into 2019, but that's the purpose, is to go around and compel banks to make this investment in holistic communities and not just the ones that offer them the best, maybe revenue position and that kind of thing. Now, for clarity, CRA is not designed to force the bank to make crazy loans or to loan to people who don't have the wherewithal to perform for that loan, which is to pay it back with interest with the time that you agree to do so. It's not designed to do that. So it's not designed to put the bank at risk. It's actually to do the opposite. It's designed to help mitigate some of those risks by investing in these communities where resources oftentimes are not there or prevalent. So what I learned there is that Georgia does a really solid job. They're kind of a model. Their Bankers Association is very strong, has really good leadership. And matter of fact, I'm attending the retirement reception of their president and CEO in Atlanta on next week. So I'll spend a few days down there and visit a few banks along the way. But that associated, so there were some really good best practices that came from that, of some things that some of the banks are doing and things that some of the association is really pushing them to do and holding them accountable. And so the question I have for you all as you're listening to this podcast is, if you weren't aware of CRA, it is one of the only examinations that the bank has that is public. Okay, let me say that again. It's one of the only examinations that the bank has that is public. You can mostly find it on their website. If you cannot find it on their website, you can call the bank, and they do have to provide that to you as a United States citizen. They do have to provide you a copy of their most recent CRA exam. So you can read it for yourself, and you can determine whether, no matter what their ranking is, whether it's outstanding, satisfactory, needs improvement, whatever it is, that you can understand where the bank's position is, and then you can challenge them and hold them accountable or congratulate them on the work that they're doing. And so that's important that you do that with your bank. So if you've got the ability to put money into a bank that allows them to invest that money, you need to know where that money is being invested. And I don't care if you've got $50 in your checking account. I don't care if you keep $10,000 in a savings, or you got $100,000, or whatever the dollar amount is, and you're investing in that bank. What does that bank invest in with your money? They keep in mind they'll charge you fees and do all this other stuff, right? Based on however you behave with the account. But I'm challenging everybody that's listening to this podcast on Facebook Live is to go back, talk with your bank or connect with your bank, and ask about their CRA performance and ask for the CRA exam. If they do not share that with you, I want to know about it. Okay, point blank. So I want you to email me. If you reach out to your bank and a week goes by and they don't share with you the CRA exam, now it could be the person you reached out to went on vacation, blah, blah, blah. But if they don't do it, I want to know about it. Ron at themybpodcast.com. Ron at themybpodcast.com. I want you to email me because I want to know about that so that I can work with you and partner with you to make sure that you get that information that you're seeking. Okay? So make sure that y'all do that. Ron at themybpodcast.com. So it's very critical that we make sure that we hold the banks accountable. Some of these banks have some really rich history, y'all. And that history goes back to some of these banks, like Bank of America, J.P. Morgan Chase, and some of these banks funded slave trade. So if you want a research project, go back and look at how some of the banks funded slave trade, how they funded Adolf Hitler, how they funded these things, these terrorist acts that have gone on. And some people, they get the direct deposit every week. They got your debit card. They go in the branch and deposit money. And I'm not speaking ill on anybody. I just want you to know the truth of the matter. So go research that for yourself. But your bank may be the funder of your oppressor. Okay? And that can go across many different ethnic groups. So make sure you check that out. But hold your bank accountable to what they do in the community. Communities that thrive, and this is something that's often missed because people's relationship with money is very interesting. People tend to love it and worship it so much, and then they never have it or claim to never have it. But money is a sore spot for a lot of people. And sometimes when people don't have it, they're adversarial towards it, or they avoid it. So they don't like money conversation. So broke folk don't like money conversation because broke folk only think about things in terms of money. So when I say broke, they get mad because all they know broke as is money, right? But a broke spirit, a broke mentality is really what I'm speaking to. That can include money, doesn't exclude it, but it's not limited to just money. But most people, that's all their mind can wrap around is just about money. All right? But we don't like to have that conversation. So the thing that edifies our communities when we talk about reinvestment is we have got to get to where we own our bank in our community, people. You know what I mean? You got to own the bank. If you don't own the bank, listen, I don't care if you own every house up and down the block. You done bought back the block. I don't care how long you lived in the neighborhood and how gold your teeth are and, how much work you done moved in the neighborhood and, how down you are and how tough you are. If you don't own the bank, right? If your money, for example, if the bank in your neighborhood funded slavery, sends all their money to the suburbs, right? You ain't doing jack, sugar, honey, iced tea. If you look at in Tulsa, Oklahoma, when you had Black Wall Street, what made Black Wall Street out of all the businesses and things like that back then, you want to know what really made it? Was them owning the bank. The money stayed there, right? If the money goes away, if the money goes out, right? So if we go and we make a bunch of money and we've got our affinity group and all the money goes to someone else, it's not circulating in the community. So it does no benefit. So then, we don't have the option for endowment. We don't have the option to invest. That's what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So then a rumor goes around, and now the police and everybody comes and they burn it down. Why? Because they weren't able to do the next step, which was then insulate themselves. Create your own police force. Create your own, if you want to say army or military, but your own defense force. They didn't do that. But what they did have is you got to have your own bank. It makes no sense to talk all this woke stuff and be all the, and then all your money go right to them, that they turn around and send their kids to Ivy League schools and to private schools and all that with the interest off your money. Because with your checking account, even if I ain't got but $150 in my checking account. Okay, but if they got millions of customers with $150 in their account, that's a lot of money that every night they're sweeping over. The bank is who I'm talking about. The bank is sweeping that money over. They're not paying you any interest, right? Or they're paying it so low, they're paying you a tenth of 1%. So they're taking your money, but they're putting it in the market, earning 5 and 10, 15%. And then they'll go lend it to somebody for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8%. Your money. All right? So it don't matter. So all that talk about this and that, listen, until you own the bank, you're not really owning much of anything. If you don't own the means of production and you don't own, see, when you own the bank, what happens is all of us, so let's take it, because I'm going to talk about my home area, which is Orange Mound, which is the original community that was built for blacks in this country. It goes back and forth with Harlem, New York. So in Orange Mound, it does us no good. In Orange Mound, I think you've got Regions Bank and you've got First Tennessee. And there may be another one here and there, but those are kind of the two prominent ones. A lot of banks have left the area. All right. So it does us no good to go build up a bunch of stuff in Orange Mound, get all, people get all emotional and built up about it. They learn the history of it, so they become fans of the area. Right? And there's nothing wrong with area having fans. I love all the fans of Orange Mound and people that learn the history and have righteousness around wanting to invest and not capitalize off gentrification. But here's the deal. If we're not going to talk about how we provide fresh food and things like that to the area, and if we're not talking about where the money goes once everybody makes it, because if it all goes to the banks that I mentioned, what is their investment back into the community? Where's that money going? That money's going to invest then, in a lot of cases, other communities. And the community, say Orange Mound, gets some of the crumbs. We've got to own the bank. How do you own the bank? You can buy an existing one, or you can get a charter and start your own, whether it's bank or credit union, but you got to have some central hub where that money is going. Think about how much money is deposited probably out at Orange Mound for those that are in Memphis. There's probably millions that goes to all these different banks all around, right? A lot of them aren't even headquartered in Memphis. They're headquartered in areas where that's where their money goes. Your money then goes, when they sweep it overnight, every day they sweep that money, because that money's just, it's not, all of it's not sitting in the vault, y'all. Everybody in Memphis' money ain't sitting in no vault in Memphis, right? They take the money, they sweep it over, they invest it, they lend it. Who are they? The bank. So again, we've got to have ownership in this. So that's what I'm challenging us going into 2019, and it's part of why I've gone to this side of the CRA piece, which is we've got to get to in the community after we do all this buying and we're rehabbing and we're doing this, we're doing that, we're running down to city council meetings, and all this kind of stuff. We're running for office, but until you own the bank, those are great endeavors. I'm not minimizing them or anything like that, but we've got to keep that in mind. And sometimes the reason we don't keep that in mind is because broke-minded folk. We don't like to think about the money. We don't, especially when we don't have it, because we think it's the defeatist mindset, right? Here we go, and now they're gonna say we're gonna need $20,000, and shit, I don't even make that a year. You know what I mean? We don't think about other ways to invest, ways to make things happen and to come together and collaborate. We just think, well, I ain't got the money. Or we try to circumnavigate and just feel like we just go do something without any kind of plan, just so we can have a win to feel good about ourselves. It's bigger than all that. It's bigger than your emotions. All right? So I'm encouraging us, and I'm encouraging you, hold your bank accountable, but we've got to get to where in our communities we own the bank, which leads me to kind of my last point here that I want to talk about, which is black flight. And that's one of the areas that even if we do what I'm about to mention, we still have to, as people come back, we still have to own the bank. Because we got to own where the money is and our resources are being centralized, so that then they can go out and be a benefit to that community. Because imagine that the bank now is a $300 million bank in the community, and they've got the ability to borrow $10 billion, $5 billion to go fix infrastructure, to provide education, to provide resources, housing, food, entertainment, support for small business. All that should come right from your own bank, not you begging somebody else's bank. After you do all this work and then you go in to beg somebody else's bank that will let you deposit your money into it and won't lend you anything back because your credit score and because your loan to value ain't this. And come on now. That's silly, y'all. So again, we have to own the bank. So when you talk about black flight, so conversation I had on my Facebook page was centered around, I presented a scenario. I gave a couple that had been married for 12 years, grew up in the neighborhood, gone off to college, blah, blah, blah. They were living in a suburb, had a little bit of equity in their home, had 2 young children. And when I first posted it, nobody wanted to respond to the question. And it could be a timing thing, and that's true. But it could also have been some people don't like the realness of a real life scenario because it's easy to cocoon yourself in your emotion of it. Here's the thing, and let me define black flight. So for those that you may not understand, so black flight, you've heard of white flight, which is when white people move away from an area to go to another area, often to get away from a certain group of people or a certain ethnic group or whatnot. Well, black people have done the same thing. I'm guilty of that, right? So what I'm talking about is not anything that I'm exempt from. I'm guilty of that because I don't live in Orange Mound anymore. I don't right now. That can change, but I don't right now today. So I'm guilty of this. And many of you that are listening to this podcast, you may be. I'm not speaking of this from a negative thing, because here's the deal. To encourage people, so why do you want to encourage people to come back to the neighborhood? You got to think of the why, okay? Why come back, okay? The community is in dire need of not just role models, but people who are connected, who have resources, and that's what happened to our communities. Our communities deteriorated as those with wherewithal left, those without wherewithal were still there, and it's easy to cut off resources when you don't have political clout, you don't have support, you don't have resources, you don't have understanding. And so we did that. I think people did that not so much just because other areas were white. They did that because in a short period of time, right? I've got 3 daughters, right? So let me present you with the argument that people will give. I didn't give this argument, but people will give this argument. They say, well, if I go out to the suburbs, the schools are better today. Not talking about what we go fix tomorrow. I don't have tomorrow. I'm going to work. I'm running this business. I don't have 15 years to get it together. Why? Because my kids are young now. I want them to get a good education today, right? Not 15 years that I think it's going to take to change this neighborhood or change that neighborhood. And what change am I going to make on my own? Because now you got to convince a group of us to come back, not just me. So the argument was me coming back on my own. I've got to go back in the area where the same folks that I'm going to be trying to help be ready to rob me, be ready to talk about me, be ready to ridicule me, ridicule my spouse, ridicule my children, all these type of things. I don't have these issues where I'm at now, which is in the suburbs. I don't have those issues. Now, see, when I have this conversation, some people have this militant principled mindset to where they get offended by that. Sometimes it's because they can't afford to go to the suburbs, right? So they have this emotional kind of deal towards it because people sometimes have a jealousy or despite. And they'll say, no, I don't. Yeah. But yes, they do. Okay. They wish they could have that opportunity because if they did, a lot of them would. But because, again, they can't afford it, right? They're in where they can afford. And so they want people to come back. That makes sense. Again, this is not to knock people, but my point in this, y'all, is when you talk about encouraging people to come back to their core neighborhood, it's not about the tone in which you use and that kind of thing. So me and my guy, Gil Carter, Gil was on a former episode. He's the founder of the First Year Foundation Incorporated. Great brother, great friend, just like Jason. Very positive brother, always has a good word for you. But we somewhat had a difference of opinion when it comes to the approach. And my explanation back to my brother Gil was, it's not about the tone in which you use. I'm not worried about hurting someone's feelings in the process. My only position was, if you're going to compel people to come back to an area, you won't do that by being abrasive towards them. Nobody does anything. Even think for yourself. Are you going to go to a restaurant and they're going to browbeat you and that kind of thing about eating their food? You're going to say, no, the hell with you. So it's the same thing. Like, they may not care how the tone they use, but you will. Particularly if they want you to come back and invest. So my thing is that approach, that abrasive shaming approach of, well, I'm going to shame you into coming back because I want you to feel bad about this and that. That's not going to cut it because it hasn't worked. All it's done is expand suburbs. And yes, there's going to be people come back into cities and they're going to build this up, and but that's not what compels people to come back. Let me give you my opinion and thoughts on what compels blacks to come back in the neighborhoods. And it's this. They will come back when you understand. One of the first things you got to do in sales. So a lot of times these civic-minded people, that they don't think in terms of sales. They think everything about them is fiduciary duty, which is very correct. But that's not the whole world. The world's made of sales, right? The world's made of sales. You're always selling. The world's not about, well, you should do this because of that. No, F that. All right. Those folks, that's why those folks always remain broke, because they don't understand sales. All right. In sales, if you're going to compel somebody to take on something, you've got to be able to do things. So you've got to be able to showcase the features and the benefits outside of your personal principles and things like. What are the features and benefits of someone leaving and coming back? In order to give the features and benefits, you've got to understand what their real and perceived notion is of doing so. So what prevents them from wanting to come back into the neighborhood? Well, the housing's dilapidated. Well, the schools aren't that good. Well, it's further away from work. There's no mall. There's no Target. There's no Walmart. Right? The fast food sucks. Right? I've got, in the suburbs, I live in a 3,000 square foot home. And when I go back to Orange Mound, the biggest house is 1,200 or 1,300 square feet. All right? Those are the arguments, real or perceived. Some people, they've gone back to Orange Mound, and I'm using it as an example, my home area. They've gone back, they've been robbed, they've been hurt. So they say, hell, I'm not going back with that. Those same people, when I go back to try to help them, they go be robbing me. All right? So some of those things that I just said are real examples. They're authentic. Some are perceived. Well, the schools aren't as good. And sometimes these people that have never stepped foot in the school, they've never seen any kind of education deliver. They just think because it's in the neighborhood and what it looks like surrounding it that the school's bad. I'm the first to tell you that growing up and going to the schools in the neighborhood and going back, because I'm an investor in the neighborhood and things like that, and I've spent time in classrooms while education's being disseminated and shared, and I'll tell you, I will put many of those kids in the neighborhood schools against some of these private school kids, and they will put foot to ass. And I'm going to say it just like that. And people can be mad, but some of these kids in the neighborhood will put foot to ass on your private school kid. Pick a subject. Pick a subject. Pick some of these kids that are being homeschooled will put foot to ass on some of these folks. And that's not to put down people in private school, but some of y'all that are paying tuition to go to school and bragging about it and stuff, some of these kids will put foot to ass. They go through real things. So they've gone more than just math and science. They know hard knocks. They know how to operate as an individual or with a team. They know how to operate through hard times. See, some of these folks, it's like Mike Tyson said, the fight don't begin till you get hit in the mouth, till someone gets hit. Now, you can have a plan, but until you get hit in the mouth. And some people who've never been hit in the mouth, they don't know how to operate, or they don't know how to operate unless they mama and daddy standing right there next to them to confirm or deny or dogmatically tell them what to do. All right. So again, I'll put some of these kids, some of the private school kids are up there too. So I'm not suggesting that it's an all or nothing proposition. Some of the private school kids are very good. They've gone through hard knocks too. So just because you pay for tuition, that's another fallacy. That doesn't mean that you're not tough or whatnot. Just because you're from the neighborhood don't mean you are tough. Okay? It goes all the way around. It's a case by case basis. But so there are things that are real and perceived. So in my opinion, where you compel people to come back, it's just like in sales. What are the features? What are the benefits? Do I understand what their knowledge is? And am I providing knowledge? So provide them with facts. Hey, the school in that neighborhood is very good. Here are the statistics. Here's what the kids are doing. They need to come see it. Just like when you're selling something. In sales, you're showing it to them. It ain't just about your emotion and your principles. Damn that. It's about, are you showing real facts? So how are you mitigating their fears? Right? Because sales is about what's the prick in the side that gets them moving, and then are you able to compel them with fact data, right, and a process in which they can follow. That's not, again, about your personal vendetta, your personal principles, or your militant ways. That doesn't compel, if the goal is to compel, and that's what I was telling my boy Gil. If your motive is to compel them to come back, that's the approach. If it's just to talk about it on Facebook, if it's just to comment, if it's just to tag folk in a Facebook post and have these endless debates about it, because nobody's going to concede. How many times y'all ever seen anybody on Facebook say, you know what, man, you were right? No, girl, you were right. Hell no. Folks will go through, they'll debate to the end. Right? They'll debate to the very end what's going on. You know what I mean? Their position. And you know what people will do if you do get over on them or they can't argue it anymore? They'll just go ghost. They'll just disappear. They'll stop commenting and they'll go on to something else. They're not going to admit it. So you're never going to get most people to do that. Here's the deal. Real, authentic facts, right? Here's how I would compel someone to come back to Orange Mound. You're needed. You're needed. No, there are not many 3,500 square feet, 3-car garage, all brick homes in Orange Mound that were built in 1990 or newer. That doesn't exist. Okay? That's not the area. Okay? So if you're coming back to Orange Mound, you have to understand that that's not going to be the case. Here's the thing. If it's you, a spouse, and one kid, what the hell do you need 3,500 square feet for anyway? Most of the house you're not even using. You pay an MLG&W for it. You're having to fix it up. Sure, some of the houses in the mound were better constructed back in the day, but that's back in the day, right? So you're still going to have maintenance issues. You got maintenance issues in the suburbs. But here's the thing, y'all. Take the issues that people have, and those are the main issues that people are going to have is housing, perception of neighborhood, and school. Them the three areas. And then you get, sometimes some of the women that, are, God forbid if they, a few miles away from Target or Walmart. Yeah, I mess with the ladies some on that. Some of the dudes are like that too, I guess. But the three core areas that prevent people from sometimes coming back to places like the Mound is going to be the real or perceived thought or notion of schools for their children, crime, real or perceived. This is a city in Memphis that we report every damn thing. I mean, every time somebody steps on a pencil and breaks it, we report it. Other cities don't report all that crime, so it's not constantly perpetuated. But we report everything. which sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not. And the people, a lot of times here in Memphis, we're our own worst enemy, because the news just reports what we click on. So we click on every time somebody gets stabbed or shot. So that's what they show. And when a kid, makes a perfect score on the SAT, we share it a little bit, but not to the same rate when every kid gets shot or stabbed, or there's some domestic thing, or there's, some break-in, or there's a fire. We share that to death, and we comment on it, and we print it off. We have debates about it and all this. So we become our own worst enemy in that. Sure, there's crime that goes on. A lot of crime goes on in the suburbs. Let me tell you guys something real quick too. When I was in high school, when I went from Melrose High to Houston, right out in the suburbs, there was actually, be honest with you, there was more things that went on in Houston than Melrose. There was more disposable income. You had more resources to do dumb shit. Right? But let me tell you the difference. When something went down at Houston, everybody couldn't talk to the media. When the media showed up, they didn't let every kid run up and let them interview every kid and let every kid give their version about what they saw. It was controlled environment. They said, listen, Ron is your contact. You don't talk to anybody else. Ron's your guy, or Jane is your girl. And guess what Ron or Jane are going to say? We have the situation under control. We will provide more information as we conduct our investigation. Period. That don't even make the news. That's not enough for them. That's not juicy enough for them to put on the news. But sometimes in the neighborhood schools, when the same thing happens, the media comes up, and every little kid they stick a microphone in front of, and so they're talking and they're spilling the beans. Yeah, I seen Rico punched Mako in the mouth, and and he's blood, and he's Cripped, and it was a gang initiation. So they let everybody talk. There's not a controlled environment. Now, some of that I think may have changed over time, but I know when I was in school, there was no controlled environment sometimes in the neighborhood schools. So everybody got a chance to have a voice in that. Thus, that school gets this perception when they're on the mass media news. So that's what we've got to change, y'all. So you got to address people. So when people give this, don't get upset when people give their reasons, whether it's excuses or reasons, whatever it is, for why they're not going to go back. Don't get upset with that. Address that where that is. If you want to compel them to come back, and it's not being soft. I'm not talking about you can't use a tone that may rub. It's a difficult conversation anyway, where you talk about where to live and where to relocate your family. And if you're single and the only ass you have to wipe is your own, that's different than when you got other asses to wipe and other mouths to feed. Right? So you're not always eligible to speak. When you broke and the only place you can live is, in certain places, that's different than when you've got options. Right? Either way, it's not about us being adversarial towards each other or militant or any of that. That doesn't bring us together. What brings us together is that collaborative. Let's take the issues, whatever it is. I don't care what it is. Put it out on the table. What's your perception? Why won't you move back? All right? Why won't you move back? And once you share that, let's just address step by step. Let's address each one of those concerns. Right? And the common ones is the ones you're going to get. So let's address those. So I encourage everybody, no matter what your ethnicity background is, we've got to go back, and we've got a responsibility, fiduciary responsibility, to go back into communities. But we've got to compel people with the right kind of heart and the right kind of spirit and the right kind of collaborative mindset. And then we'll be able to reinvest in the community collectively. Not just me, not just my boy Justin Spencer or Reginald Pruitt, not just people that I know and that y'all know that are in these communities around the country that are buying real estate and land and properties and serving on city council, serving on county commissions, things like that. But all of us holistically, and we can own the bank. We can own the bank, y'all. Okay? So I hope that today's episode, I'm able to share some information with you. If you agree, if you disagree, that's completely fine. I love to hear from you. So definitely reach out to me. I gave the email address earlier, ron@thenybpodcast.com. Let's reinvest in this community and let's go back. I'm working on it. Like I told you, I was guilty of it myself. I'm looking at and we'll be discussing and have discussed with my wife and with the family about what that looks like for us to go back. Yeah, as you know, it's not something that you just, like any living situation, you don't just jump up and do stuff. You have to understand, the means behind it and the strategy and the timing and things like that. But it's something we all need to consider and we all need to do. And we need to do that without shaming and without being militant, but being collaborative. And that's what it's about. I'm Champ Ron, your host. This is episode 67 of the Minding Your Business podcast. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Do not forget the Binge Network. Yes. The Binge Podcast Network. I talked about it at the beginning, and I'd love for you all to hit us up. The website is coming very soon, and you're going to be able to be fully entrenched and engaged, baby, with podcast hosts, bringing a myriad of content, a myriad of connectivity. And diversely rich. I mean, it's going to educate, it's going to inform, it's going to influence, it's going to intrigue, it's going to be funny at times, it's going to be sad at times. It's going to take you through all those different emotions. But I want you to connect with these shows as they come out. We're going to have different show hosts join podcasts and things like that to kind of cross-pollinate. If you want to be involved, now's the time. All right, don't be one of these folks that wait till it all jump off and then you come running. We'll accept you then too, but it's going to be, I've always had what I call lack of vision pricing. So I've always built that into my business, lack of vision pricing, which is folk that show up when everybody else done it and they wait to see, those late bloomers. They're the ones that are just now getting the iPhone 6. You know what I mean? The 10 come out today, and these jokers still, they wait for everything to, let me wait till everybody done had it and confirmed it and all this kind of stuff. So if you're one of those folks, you're just now getting the iPhone 6 and the 10's out, baby, you go pay the upgrade. I'm just going to tell you right now. So if you want to be involved, inbox me or inbox Dominic Lawson on Facebook, or you can email me at that same email address. I'd love to hear from you. If you want to be a supporter of it, if you want to be a sponsor, get in with us early, because we're going to have, again, great content from not just in Memphis, but all over the country and in some cases even all over the world, baby. The Binge Podcast Network. Okay? All right? So that's what it's going to be about. All minds clear? All right? If all minds are clear, then we're going to get out of here. Listen, I want y'all to enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend. In the memory of my boy, Jason Daniels, tighten up, baby. There's a titan in everybody. And that's what Jason would say. So definitely tribute to my boy. Thank you all for all your support. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Subscribe, listen, and share. And just do that for me. I'm Champ Ron. Y'all be great. And I'll see you next week with more content from the Minding Your Business podcast.